friends, and welcome to Tim Kirby Russia, where I, veteran political analyst and radio talk shows Tim Kirby, tell you how the world looks through a Russian lens. Today's guest is Hrvoje Morić, who is the host of Geopolitics and Empire. And don't worry, he has no accent at all. He just has a very fancy foreign-sounding name. So anyways, my American brother is going to be with me. Very soon we're going to talk some geopolitics and some empire. But for now, let's take a look at that topic through that good old Russian filter. You know, if you look at pretty much any like science fiction or fantasy series, if there's some sort of empire in it, that empire is always bad. But the thing is, if you were to ask, say, Russian intellectuals about an empire, well, first off, they would assume that as you're a foreign person, they'd have like a 20-minute breakdown how land empires are great for uniting and protecting smaller ethnic minorities, whereas sea empires like, Spain and England are exploitive and are the source of slavery and all. So after that 20-minute spiel, they might actually pause and tell you something very important. That essentially empires are more or less a sort of kingdom or nation that is multi-ethnic, that there's some sort of maybe core ethnicity that expands and has control over other different ethnicities. The whole sort of like Westphalian system, I guess they call it in Europe, where there's one nation with one ethnicity in it. That is sort of the anti-empire. And so throughout all of our media, especially science fiction and fantasy, this concept of the Westphalian state, the single ethnicity mono-state, is always the good guy, whereas the empire is the bad guy, which is kind of strange because, countries like the United States aren't exactly mono-ethnic, are they? Because if you think about it, if empire is bad, right, that we have to have this mono-ethnic teeny tiny states, then the world is going to keep getting divided over and over and over again into teeny tiny subdivisions of ethnicities. I mean, look, even Spain is too big for the Catalonians, and the remnants of the British Empire are too uncomfortable for the Scots. So for some reason, we're all sort of programmed to believe that empire is bad. And yet when you think about it, who are the major players on Earth right now? The United States, Russia, China. All three great massive nations that have more of that sort of imperial structure to them. So it kind of begs the question, well, if empire is so bad, why does it work so well, baby? So if you don't believe about this whole empire thing, look at a map of Europe with a bunch of empires on it, and look at a map of Europe that's full of independent states. The borders are a lot different, and when states are independent, there's a whole heck of a lot more of them. And one thing I can tell you from a Russian perspective is that all the former Soviet, republics, when they got their freedom or independence, or whatever you want to call it, they were all sure that this was going to be, their chance to really succeed, that the Russian yoke is thrown off them, and finally they're going to become these big, important, major players, and they're all poor and worthless. They all really couldn't find something to do with themselves. Well, I guess Ukraine kind of found a sense of meaning, in a sense, the wrong sense of meaning. But as you see, being these tiny sort of separate little nations, no one cares about them. They have no relevance. They have no meaning. They had much, especially let's take a little country like Armenia. Armenia had much greater respect and relevance as part of a greater Russian empire than it does as a little independent country that no one knows exists. So anyways, when we sit down and think about things, if you are a member of a smaller ethnicity, do you think it's better for you to have a completely teeny tiny independent nation, maybe the size of New Jersey, with an economy the size of Tucson, Arizona? Or would you rather be part of something greater that might be able to protect you and provide a lot of benefits, like, for example, the entire Chinese economy? That's up to you, my friends. But we shouldn't just immediately continue this weird tendency that every empire in the media is always evil, because I don't think that the question is that open and shut. So anyways, here comes Hrvoje Morić, who's going to talk to us about geopolitics and empire. Hrvoje, you're kind of an eclectic guy. I mean, you have this very Eastern European sounding, Croatian name, but you're born in America and you stand shoulder to shoulder with American conservatives. In fact, you host your show on the TNTradio.live network with a whole bunch of people with very Anglo-Saxon sounding names like the kind that I have, although I'm not an Anglo-Saxon. And I mean, dude, you are super pro-Constitution, super American values, but from what I also understand, you may have just bailed on the United States forever. And I think you actually have a third citizenship somewhere. So, dude, what's going on? Could you tell us about your background and what is your sort of overall worldview here?
Yeah, so I was born in the U.S. and so I'm an American, but I'm ethnic Croat. My name actually means Croatian, and I grew up between both countries. We moved back and forth, and I speak both languages. I'm fluent in Croatian, and that kind of informs my worldview, as you said. And then I went on. I did Peace Corps Mongolia. I studied international relations in Geneva, Switzerland, and then I got a job a decade ago teaching in Mexico, and I also became a nationalized Mexican, and I lived for 3 years in Kazakhstan, and that's why I got this kind of international view. And yeah, I'm a proud Croatian, I'm a proud American, and a proud Mexican. But around the 2000s, I kind of noticed I never realized America was an empire, because you just go on with your life, you go to school, you go to parties and stuff, and you just think you're a U.S. citizen, like you're a citizen of any other nation. And then 9/11 happens, and I it's my view that was a false flag operation, and then I realized I started studying history. I realized America's an empire. That you learn about all the things that they're doing, the starting all of these wars. When I learned about the Gulf of Tonkin false flag, it's declassified now. You can see that they started the Vietnam War based on a lie, the Iraq War based on a lie. Actually, one of my professors in Geneva, Curtis Dobler, Dutch-American human rights lawyer, he was Saddam Hussein's defense counsel. So I studied under Curtis Dobler, who defended Saddam Hussein, not because Saddam was a good guy, but because the whole thing about him having WMDs and all of this stuff wasn't true. And so, yeah, so I like the Constitution. I'm a patriot in that sense. But, I've interviewed Johan Galtung, who's 90 years old, the founder of Peace and Conflict Studies. And I like how he says it. I love the U.S. Republic, but I hate the American empire. So that's kind of like, it sums it up in a nutshell,
Okay, so on February 24th, a lot of us, including me, were kind of worried we might get drafted to go to the front in Ukraine. But things have turned out better than a lot of us might have first expected. Well, to be honest, I didn't expect that we'd go to war in the first place. But anyways, so how have international relations, the geopolitical game, and so on and so forth, how has this all changed since the special operation started?
It seems like, as you said, I interview a lot of people on my TNT show and my Geopolitics and Empire, a lot of world-renowned experts. There does seem to be a consensus that the Sino-Russian world, the world island in a sense, as Mackinder put it, or the Eurasian multipolar world, that it is on the rise, and then the West is in decline. I've been focusing on the West the last 20 years, as you said, because I'm from the West, and I've been interviewing people like Morris Berman and Johan Galtung, where we've been tracking the decline of the West in all facets. One reason I left the United States in 2006, I have a multicultural background, so I just like to travel and learn new languages and integrate with local cultures. But I also could see the American empire was declining, and as it declines, it becomes culturally degenerate. As we can see with all of the trans and all of this stuff and the bread and circuses, everyone's just so obese and just watching Netflix and talking about sports, trivial matters. It would decline economically, which I think we're seeing in the West, and it would become totalitarian, authoritarian, which we're seeing now. And so, yeah, I think what's happening now that the East is rising, this Eastern Bloc, and yeah, as you said, I think the West has overplayed its hand, and I feel that it is pretty weak, and it's things are kind of balancing out in terms of a balance of power between Russia and China, other states, and this Western bloc.
So what do you think is the real reason why the United States is in decline? I mean, there's the factor of nothing lasts forever, history is cyclical, so on and so forth, but these are just kind of, buzzwords. What's the real nitty-gritty? Why is this happening?
Well, I think one thing, as you mentioned, there is that cyclical thing. Like everything has a finite life cycle. You can't, in terms of economy, we've just a historic amount of debt and the money printing, and things just cannot go on physically, right? Like you just cannot go beyond the nature's, laws and barriers in one sense. So as you said, there is that cycle to empire, which no one has beaten it. All empire, all currencies have gone to zero. Every single currency in the history of the world, all empires have risen and fallen. So there's that. Maybe in this moment in time, I think there's also a globalist element to this, which is not often talked about, let's say, on channels that do geopolitics, where I do think there is this concentrated global oligarchy, which is international, a transnational elite, let's say, and that they also, so you have the state that the U.S. is in, but you also have this transnational elite. Maybe the U.S. has peaked and it's declining, but you have this also globalist elite that wants to accelerate artificially that decline. So I think they have, maybe if there wasn't this global elite, things would have declined slower in the West. But I think they're just like pouring, how do you say, like gas on the fire, these globalists, and they want to destroy any potential, they want to balkanize like they did in Yugoslavia, like they've done in Iraq. It's just classic imperial, British imperial divide and conquer, as you see all over the planet. And I kind of feel like they want to use that balkanization model in the U.S. because they want to have a global governing system, and they can't have anyone who could theoretically be a resistance, so.
Well, here about balkanization, this kind of reminds me of a set of beliefs that I call the black pill. They kind of, well, first off, there's a lot of black pill beliefs, but one of them is that, like, nah, man, Trump, Putin, Xi, they're all part of it. It's all an illusion, man. All sides are fighting for the same thing. It's lost, man. Okay, then I guess you need to just go live in a hole or something, because then all humanity's lost because everything's fake. But anyways, I mean to say that, in the West, if there is this balkanization of the West happening, and it's going to sort of, bring the West down, well, the Western elites, they're going to have nowhere else to live because they're the Western elites. Trust me, no one's waiting for them in China.
Well, I kind of view, I'm kind of, I like this nuanced take where I'm not like in full either camp. Like, I think, as you were alluding, that nation states are sort of, how do you say, or organic, a bit fluid, and so you do have, take any country. Let's take my third home country, Mexico, which I'm a citizen of. The governor of the state where I live in, he's captured. He's a captured globalist. When I came back 2 years ago, I could see by his actions, he was literally before my eyes carrying out openly globalist agendas. Carrying out, I found the white papers of the, the city it's a smart city. It literally gets funding from Rockefeller. And then I just a week ago, I actually found from 2019 a photo of the governor. His name is Enrique Alfaro. He was in California at the World Economic Forum offices, and he took a picture with the WEF logo behind him. So, but take the example of Mexico, but it's not like all of them are yet, at least. You take maybe the president like AMLO, he seems to be kicking against some of the globalist stuff. So it seems like, maybe he's not captured. Maybe some of the other people are alongside AMLO are not captured. Then you've got a plethora of mayors and governors which are captured. And I kind of see that same thing going on in all countries, including Russia, where you've got, maybe a group of Russians that are nationalists or patriotic. But then you've got others and other agencies of power which are, on board with these globalists. And I just kind of see that across the board in every single country, even my own. I mean, I'm here in Croatia, and I have nothing but disdain for pretty much all of the ruling class here. It's like a mafia. They do whatever Brussels says. And so, yeah.
Now, I just wanted to say, sir, that you have over 300 podcasts complete. Dude, you're one heck of a producer, because if there's one thing that I am not good at in this program, it's hunting people down. That's kind of actually the hardest part. I can write a lot about geopolitics. Finding someone to talk to about is the difficult thing. But anyways, that's me. Now let's get to what you were saying about this sort of like Mexican governor guy. Now, say some sort of Mexican governor serves globalist interests. Does that mean that he's some sort of true believer? Or is he just kind of like a human placeholder who's just going to sit there and take money and do whatever people tell him to do? What's the true nature of all this?
I think it's the second thing you said. I don't think he believes in it. I think I think a lot of these guys are opportunists. If you look at Mexico, I think they're just bought. Well, there are a number of things. They're bought off financially. I don't think they really believe in this stuff. They're just opportunistic. And so they'll take the money, but also threats. Well, I mean, Mexico's a special case because you've got the cartels, and then they threaten you like to kill you outright if you don't kind of do what they say. And so as a politician in Mexico, usually you're easily moldable. You don't really have a strong ideology. But yeah, I would say he, for example, I don't think he really believes in it. He's just a total opportunist. I've met people who've like met him briefly, or I mean, you could just tell he's just a total. He doesn't have an ideology like most politicians. They just go whichever way the wind blows. No, and I think you can say the same maybe with Trudeau's and Mark Roots. That well, maybe some of them do drink the Kool-Aid, but I don't know it's a mix between opportunism.
Now, as many of my regular viewers know, I'm very critical of the idea that 400 guys who aren't experts on the laws they're voting on, sitting in a room, is a system of making laws that maybe should have remained in the past. I mean, the Founding Fathers did a brilliant job. We're not going to touch the U.S. Constitution. Let's let that go. Maybe in Russia we can be a little bit more experimental. But that's, beside the point. Sorry, friends, parts of this video got corrupted. So anyways, as I was saying, the Founding Fathers did a great job of setting up a brilliant system, but over these many years, it looks like every loophole and crack has been founded to exploit it to the extreme. So what sort of systemic answers could solve these problems that are now inherent in our system?
Yeah, I've thought about this for a while, and COVID just kind of woke everyone up. And yeah, I've interviewed Gregory Copley of the International Strategic Studies Association. He's like in his 70s or 80s, and he's worked with high-level people. And in an interview, he said democracy is dead right now. Like we're in an age globally, it's dead. It's toast. It doesn't exist anymore. We're now moving into an age of authoritarianism. Maybe at some point in the future, it'll come back. But I'm just disillusioned with democracy. To me, it just seems like an illusion, a scam. It's this a financial elite can just buy up anyone that they want. So you don't really have a democracy. Maybe initially it worked out for a while, but over time, as you said, it just inevitably becomes corrupted. And then whoever's got the money can just buy whichever party, politicians. I don't think there is any. I'm a believer in Christ, and I don't think there is or ever will be any perfect system because man is imperfect. So any institution or organism is never going to be perfect. We can just kind of try the best that we can, but it's also an eternal struggle throughout history. You need a public that is intelligent and willing to sacrifice to maintain freedom and liberty. And I think the strongest tactic over the last century, kind of, I guess you were mentioning that, maybe it was the tactic of the devil that instead of pushing forcefully against us, like in a fascist manner, he kind of went the Brave New World route. Just let us get fat, for the slaughter. And so just kind of gave us everything that we wanted, just get us fat and dumb, like in idiocracy. And that was the easier way sort of to manage us, steer us into this kind of controlled system. And so I think the only solution that I can think of is if try to get people again to start reading and start caring about all of these things that matter. Because otherwise, if you have a dumbed down population, I don't know what good solution will there be. I mean, if you have a king that's benevolent, how long will that last? If he dies, he gets replaced by a dictator. So
you mentioned a brave new world. After all the intellectual discourse you've been involved in, do you ever feel that humans, for the most part, are just on a genetic level going to go happily into the comforts of an Aldous Huxleyan reality? I mean, if you look at society now, not much has changed. We're still living in a medieval world. It's just the peasantry doesn't really make food anymore. Or am I just becoming black-pilled now myself?
I'm more in that sense of the black-pilled view. I mean, I try to challenge myself to, as anyone who tries to think critically, you challenge your own view, and I just can't get away from it because, I mean, and one, I believe in the Bible and the prophecy that, that sort of end time scenario, whenever it is, I don't know when it is. It could be this decade or 50 years from now, century. But I just see things over time getting progressively worse, climaxing, the end of history and then Christ coming back. And the people that I talk to, like I'm here in Croatia, and just this week I had lunch with a listener, a Geopolitics and Empire listener, TNT radio listener. He took me out to lunch. He left the U.S. He decided to leave permanently, and he's between Europe and Latin America. He's really like bracing for impact. So I keep meeting so many of these smart people, including many of my guests who are like bugging out and they're bracing for impact. And even today, there's this Canadian couple that fled Mexico. They're called, they used to have a YouTube channel called Life with Leakmans. They just posted today or yesterday, like they're saying, this is our last video. We're closing the YouTube. And they're saying stuff like, They think things are getting bad. They know someone in the Canadian government that says lockdowns are coming again, and it's just like, I'm just, from talking to listeners and some of my guests, the conclusion is that things are just slowly or quickly getting progressively worse. So I'm black-pilled in the sense. I kind of I don't see, and there's not enough critical mass now of people pushing back. And I'm here in Croatia. I'm in Mexico. I just see that there's just not enough pushback quickly enough. So.
My question for you is, how do we get then this elite to change its narrative? Because when you go to Russia, the future looks awesome. There's nobody who's worried about climate change. They're not worried about resources. Life here is as kind of calm and full of optimism as like in 1950s America. I mean, too, and if you ever get the chance to talk to the occasional Russian billionaire, they don't believe in any of this globalist crap either for the most part. Well, some of them do, but the ones I've met don't. So anyways, if we could maybe just convince the elite that all this like Greta Thunberg, climate change, Bill Gates, Malthusianism, we don't need it. So how do we do it? How do we get the elite to believe in something sane?
Yeah, I recall an interview I did with Sean Stone, Oliver Stone's son, just a couple months back. He said something interesting. He thought that there are good Illuminati, let's say, good elites. You've got the bad and the good. That he thinks there are some that maybe don't agree with the elite program, but especially in the West, as you said, coming out of the British Empire, I think the West is essentially ruled by the Anglo-American Empire, the British Empire especially, but this European aristocracy. At their core, I mean, I believe that is their ideology. Like, I think it's eugenicist, it's Malthusian. They're talking about it nonstop, going back a century. That's their core belief. I think they have these occult, esoteric beliefs that are, I don't know what's the best phrase. I don't like outright saying like satanic or Satanism, but
I sure do.
Maybe it's Luciferian, because look, what was it, 2009, when I was in Geneva, I attended a meeting of the Lucis Trust NGO, which was founded in it was founded in 1922 by Alice Bailey. It was originally called the Lucifer Publishing Company, and it was influenced by Helena Blavatsky, the Theosophist, and they changed their name to Lucis Trust. They're an NGO that's officially a member of the United Nations. And you go to their website, they believe that Lucifer is the Christ, that Lucifer is the Messiah. They literally say that. So Christians believe, that there will be like Lucifer will come in the Antichrist, in the guise of Christ. They believe that Lucifer actually is the Messiah, that he is the Mahdi to the Muslims, the Maitreya to all of these other religions, and he's the Christ, and they're preparing for his return. So I went to one of their meetings, and in their literature, they talk about this. So if you've got this real organization, and it's like crazy things at the UN, like you've got at the UN in Geneva, they've got the coffee lounge. It's called the Serpentine Lounge. In the conference hall across from the UN, where they have the office of the Lucis Trust, we would go there for talks. I have photos where the microphones are pyramids, and when you turn on the microphone to speak, the capstone turns red. And so you see all this crazy, Luciferian symbolism everywhere. So that's kind of my answer. I know there are people that are not religious or spiritual, and they just kind of don't like talking about this. They poo-poo this, but I mean, this is what I'm seeing, and that's a core of their belief. So.
Now, from what I understand, you bailed on America to go to Croatia. Was that connected to your podcasting or to some specific event? Have you been sort of on the bad end of the repression stick or something?
Yeah, so I was in Mexico, but I just came a couple months ago because they removed all the restrictions, and I wanted to come home for a while. And now I'm debating. I don't know if I want to live in Croatia or Mexico, because, like I said, I see bad things coming down the line, and I want to be somewhere where you've got food and water in a rural area. And I'm noticing Mexico has been a good location, but Croatia is kind of like the Mexico of the United States of Europe. It's low population density. I've got the village not far from where I am. There's clean water, a lot of good resources. So it wouldn't be a bad option, but we're part of the EU, which is total totalitarian technocracy, a fascist system. And, just a few months ago, you couldn't walk into the government office, into the here to do, get any of your IDs or anything. You had to have a vaccine certificate. So yeah, I'm here in Croatia, although I do feel like I am experiencing, I've mentioned this before, from the US government, the far reach of the US. I got taken off of banned from PayPal in April, I believe by the Department of Homeland Security, because that's the same week they rolled out the Disinformation Governance Board, and then Mint Press, Consortium News, and myself were banned from PayPal, and just little things like that. My kid, we were getting her passport and citizenship at the U.S. Embassy abroad, and it's been like 4 months, and then nothing's happened. It's never happened before. And they did just respond saying, oh, there was some technicality or delay, so we're giving you an extension and send more proof. But it just, in the context of everything getting taken down by PayPal, it just does feel like the U.S. empire is causing more and more problems. They raid Trump. They 87,000 new IRS agents. I mean, you can just see more and more they're amping up this tyranny.
So how is Mexican society changing? Because in some ways, Mexico shares something unique with Russia. It's on the border of Western civilization for a long time, and also been on kind of the losing end of the stick of that border. So how is their society changing, looking at sort of the West that they may have possibly idolized, like the Russians after all these generations, falling apart and just dissipating into dust before their eyes?
I'd say Mexican people, by and large, and it's very similar in all of Latin America, they're very easygoing, very friendly. They're not as explosive as, let's say, Slavs. You come here to Croatia and they argue with each other and just very hard-headed. And Mexicans are just very kind of easygoing. They don't get freaked out. They treat everyone kindly. Oh, I mean, overall, except for the narcos that chop your head off. But
well, that's business.
I would say, yeah, that's business. But actually, this is great. Like literally 2 days ago, I live in Guadalajara in Mexico when I'm not in Croatia. They had narco blockades. So it was like a scene from Batman. All over the city, they burned buses. I think no civilians were killed. But I mean, you had freaking narco blockades in my home just a few days ago. But back to what you're saying, I feel like the Mexicans, it's like they're still living under the Spanish Empire, in a sense, from hundreds of years ago. They still have that mentality of being sort of like meekish and happy with the little that they got. And I think they look up to the U.S., the working class of Mexico. And so many of them are grateful for the not crazy Americans that come and the opportunity to go to the U.S. and make money and have a better life. But you've also got, as you said, it's not happening so fast, but it is happening. Mexicans, I have a Mexican friend. A lot of them work in IT and this stuff. He was given a well-paying job opportunity in the U.S. and he refused. He decided to stay in Mexico. So I know a good number of Mexicans that have had opportunities. I mean, even recently, I talked to a lot of people, or Mexicans that where I live, working class, barbers, construction workers. So many of them actually have U.S. citizenship or U.S. permanent residency, and they prefer to live in Mexico. So, and then you have like AMLO in the sense the president who is willing to work with Russia and everyone, and sort of kicking against the U.S. empire. We see that with these tariffs related to NAFTA, with not wanting to go against Russia, to working with the Chinese and other countries, with Venezuela, and so yeah, there is this shift you are seeing in the current, especially with the current ruling party in Mexico.
So anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video and you like the opinions coming out of my big fat mouth, then join up on my Telegram channel. That's Tim Kirby Hardcore on Telegram. Link, of course, in the description.